Okay, well, with no further ado, I'm going to introduce the two facilitators, Dr. Fred Trapp and Joyce Black, who are going to make a presentation. They're going to start by just telling you a little bit about what we're going to do today, as well as the two future forums that are coming up this semester. So, thank you.
Kathy. This is kind of our overview for the session today. I want to start by taking one step backward and sharing with you a few slides about your external environment, some things that I discovered since we last met. And then most of the presentation this afternoon is going to be what we've called an internal scan, where we're going to take a look at some of the characteristics of your students, some of the characteristics of your curriculum, and a little quick look at a couple slides on your workforce. The student characteristics and the curriculum characteristics are going to be reminiscent of some of the information you saw last fall when you were working on your strategic plan. And I was inspired by your research office to go back and look at those topics again and call them to your attention. We're going to finish up by just recapping what your strategic priorities were and remind you what the board has set for its goals and then the superintendent's goals for this academic year. Now, when we meet again in November, our focus is going to shift and we'll be looking at institutional effectiveness, or the performance of the college. How well do the students fare who come to study here? You have, I think, a due date of the 1st of November or early November for some program reviews. And depending on how much of that material I can digest and how many of the interviews we complete by the 28th of November, we might put in a recap or highlight of themes of things we're hearing in the interviews or things that we're seeing in the program review material. By the time we get to December, what we'll be doing is offering you perspectives on opportunities for the future. And a part of that will be looking at the labor market data, where the Department of Employment Development is projecting certain occupations to have openings over the next 5 to 10 years, which are appropriate for someone coming through a community college curriculum to pursue, or someone coming through your college transferring to a four-year institution for a bachelor's degree to have their eyes set on. We'll be looking to document as best we can ideas that we've heard from you about things the college is considering in the way of new curriculum initiatives. And particularly on the CTE side, there's a kind of a pot stirring or boiling, percolating in the state with a new initiative from the Vice Chancellor that she's calling Doing What Matters for Jobs and the Economy. And here's a commercial for you. She's going to be on your campus the morning of November 1st, holding an open public hearing. It's the last of about 11 or 12 of those that she's been doing throughout the state. And she's going to be promoting regional collaboration in the CTE world to focus on industry sectors in your economic region where community colleges can make a contribution. And you might want to, if you have time, drop into that public hearing and have a listen to what this is all about. We'll also call attention to some areas where the college has been doing work on your transfer associate degrees that I want to applaud and commend you about and document in your educational master plan. And also call to your attention some work that Kathy has been started already and doing and I normally take a look at, and that is raising a question about why so many instructional programs. You have, by someone's count, around 330 degrees and certificates on the books. That seems like quite a bit for a community college. And what I normally do is look at that inventory and then look at a count of how many of those programs are granting awards over a period of several years. And when I find a list of them where no one seems to be completing the program, I put a question mark behind that to say, perhaps you would want to reconsider the design or the marketing or the intention of these programs as an opportunity for the future for you. Joyce will also by that time have some attendance and growth projections that we'll be sharing for you either in late November or that December 12th meeting. So those are kind of the coming attractions for the next forum or so. So let's go through the slides, and these slides will be left with you here at the college. I don't know if they're going to be posted on a website or how you're going to promulgate them, but they'll be available to you. Okay, Kathy has a website, and she'll put them up on a website. You may recall this map from the last time that we met, and I was making the point that in looking at zip codes of where students live, you are expanding your reach of educational services beyond your official college boundaries to some areas that are outside your particular official area. And if you took a 20-minute drive from this property, this is the sort of configuration you might see that covers up to 90–95% of your enrolled students in the fall semesters for the last 5 years. Since I last saw you, I did a little bit of drilling down at certain areas within the college service area. And I wanted to call this slide to your attention because it highlights the issue of both poverty and unemployment in selected parts of your sub-area. You might use as a reference the data for either the County of San Diego or the City of San Diego. And I've highlighted in yellow and some tan colors here, and in green, one case, National City, the ones that really stood out to me. On the case of unemployment, Chula Vista here. Also, Imperial Beach seems to be pretty high. And when you get down to Lemon Grove, I was noticing that they both have a problem with poverty, a high rate of poverty, and unemployment. But perhaps the prize goes, as it were, to National City, and that's why I highlighted them in green, with the double whammy of both a pretty high percent adult poverty rate and a high unemployment rate. And then Spring Valley at the kind of far end of your service area, 11% unemployment. The unemployment figures are courtesy of the workforce partnership people in the EDD office. The unemployment comes from census data. I was also looking at a longer term forecast. Normally when I presented last time, I was looking at about a 5-year window out to 2016 or so. And I turned to some information developed by your Area Council of Governments, SANDAG, which had a very nice and user-friendly web page that allowed me to take a look through their eyes at projections of population growth out to 2030. And actually, they go further out, but they did put a disclaimer and said in their forecasting models, the numbers they develop out to 2030 are based on current adopted growth plans by cities and county governments. So I felt more confident in using those than going all the way out to 2050. But 2030 still lets me make an illustration for you. That first row that's marked SWC service area is your official district service area, and SANDAG is projecting out to 2030 a 30% growth in population. Your two big cities, National City and Chula Vista, have fairly healthy growth rates as well. Now that percentage change is calculating from 2008 out to 2030. But what really caught my eye were the southern areas of your district. In the city or the county of San Diego, in the San Ysidro, Otay Mesa area, those percentage of growth changes really rattled my cage and said, oh, I don't know how many folks at Southwestern are aware of the fact that these are projections. And I have looked at a recent community plan that the city of San Diego re-promulgated for Otay Mesa in the 2010-11 timeframe. And I was reminded of urban development areas that the city of Chula Vista has on the books and moving forward, called the Millennium Project. And I know that there is perhaps some contention in the Otay Mesa area, how much of the property, the land, should be used for industrial and business development, how much of it should become residential development. But I wanted to share with you these projections of what your future might look like in that part of your service area. In the very last row, I don't know if you know the term Barrio Logan. Is anyone familiar with that term? Okay. Where do you understand it to be?
San Diego Coronado Bridge.
Right. Okay, right next to National City. This is an area where you draw students into, particularly your National City Higher Ed Center, and that's the projection for its growth according to the planning department in the city of San Diego. So to the extent you continue to draw students from that area, although it is outside your district, you're going to have another growth prospect in that particular area. And these are some things, and there are other things about sub-areas within your service district area that I'll put into the educational master plan, but I didn't have at my disposal when we were talking before about your service area. So I want to take this step backward to give you additional context on the environmental scan. Let's turn our attention now to a profile of your students. And again, this material will be similar to material your research office has provided to you that you saw last year when you were working on your strategic plan. Each of this next series of slides will try to give you a trend line of fall semesters from 2007 to 2011. And the trend that I'm seeing here is that you're growing in male students and declining a bit in female students. But of the two, you are a largely female higher educational institution, which makes you very much like everyone else. For some reason, the fellows never seem to get the word, go to college after high school. I don't know where they go, to the world of work, maybe to the military, but almost all schools we work with, it's predominantly a female population. Age ranges. In this particular case, what I'm seeing is that you've dropped a bit in the gray-haired folks, like myself, the 50 years and older at the top of each column. And you've picked up between the ages 25 to 34. And this may be a symptom of the current recession where people are coming to community colleges looking for opportunities to retool to get a job again, or to get a better job, or to get ahead. Pretty steady on the younger traditional age students under 25 years of age. When we look at ethnicities, you have had a 7% increase in the white population, which is kind of the yellow or golden colored part of the column chart there. And you've had a drop, 4% in Hispanic population, and a drop of 2% in Asian. Looking out into the future for your service area, you can see continued growth of the Hispanic population as well as relatively stable white population. I looked at unit load, and in making this distinction, what I'm using is part-time is a student with fewer than 12 semester units, full-time is 12 or more. You've dropped in the non-credit area, perhaps because you've shrunk in the offerings there by some 4%, and you've had a spike up of 5% in the full-time students attending the college. And I think we've seen that at some other schools as well, young people coming to school full-time. I looked quickly at time of attendance and noticed that you have a drop in the evening student attendance, which is the middle bar there that's kind of a brown color. And that may be retrenchment in your schedule of what's offered and available in the evening. And you've had a little bit of an increase in the daytime. Now I want to pause and give you an aside here. I include this slide because the daytime student count is what drives the square footage that the state will support for you in your libraries. Daytime graded students. I don't know how old that concept is, Joyce, but well, old as the hills?
1906.
1906 or whatever.
Well, that's because you only had students in the daytime. So they assume that they don't go to the library because they come in the evening, you know, it's a silly way to do it, yes.
Just a quick question, are DE students considered daytime or
The DE, distance education, I think are represented in that unknown category. So what Joyce says to the state is, those are students who are going both day and evening. And she lumps them together with the blue percentage to get a higher square footage allocation for your libraries.
One of the times, Jim Rogowski at the state is the one who is now picking up some of these numbers and all. And when you make a change in your 5-year plan or the space inventory, you know, it draws their attention. And so he called me one time and I said, Jim, we turn in from the colleges day students, day, evening combined, because some of them go both day and evening. I said, you record in the state day, evening, other. He said, yeah, that's true. I said, so if they go in the day and the evening, I count them as day because that gives you your office space. And it's a silly calculation. It's been there forever and ever and ever, and it's a dumb way to, that's where you get all your office space on the whole campus, is how many days for your library and that kind of thing. It's a dumb calculation.
And I'm going to switch from students' demographics to student placement data. Is Mark Samuels with us today? Okay, the next couple slides, I'm very grateful to your placement coordinator for sharing this data with me and answering some follow-up questions for me. He has given me placement data for English composition, ESL, reading, and math that I wanted to share with you, and just kind of take a moment to walk you through each one of the slides and make sure you and I are on the same page as to what level of curriculum we're talking about here. So if you teach English composition, keep me straight and honest here. My understanding is that both English 114 and 115 are transfer level curriculum, and 71 is the composition course one level below. And if you add together the percentages on the 2 rows for the transfer course, 114, 115, you're looking at about 2/3 of the students recommended into a transferable English composition course. I think that's amazing. I have rarely seen that at other community colleges where we've worked. In terms of numbers of students that you're talking about, in the 114, 115, you're talking at about 10,000 students being placed over these semesters into those 2 classes. The other 1/3 are going into the one course below. ESL placements were a little more difficult, and I need to have some more follow-up conversations with ESL faculty or Joel Levine or someone. The ESL curriculum, I'm told, has been kind of retooled in recent years. So my current understanding is that that bottom row that's in green, the ESL 59 A and B course is one level below transfer, and the 159 A and B is transfer. And you can see there is a small percentage of students who are placed there. That actually amounts to 17 students over all these semesters that you're looking at. Yes?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a clarification on courses that you're titling as transfer. It doesn't necessarily mean that they meet an admission criteria for transfer, but they may transfer as an elective.
As at least electives, thank you. Okay. As you kind of walk down the rest of the ESL curriculum, the 49 course is my reading of your catalog and prerequisites 2 levels below the transfer level. And then the 39 is 3 levels below, and the 29 is 4 levels below. And the very top row, 295, is 5 levels below. So if you take a look at where most of the students are placing, which is the 29 and the 39 course, that's about 72% or so of all the placements in ESL. But it turns out these are not large numbers. Mark tells me that in that first row, the 295 course, it's about 180 students. In the 29 course, about 470 students. In the 39 course, it's just over 500 students. And in the 49, it's about 180 students. Now, the thing I want to talk with someone at your college about is when I look at a chart Mark gave me and I look at your college catalog and read the prerequisites, I come up with this script I've just recited to you as to the hierarchy. But when I look at the way courses are coded and sent to the state representing the hierarchy, those two things don't seem to match up, at least from my outsider's point of view. So I need to find a subject matter expert and visit with them and compare notes and see if my hunch might be right that a little coding change is in order, or whether I'm just not reading it correctly at all. But let's move on from ESL to reading. And in the green bars, you see lots of students satisfying the proficiency reading requirement, which I presume is a graduation requirement for you? Okay. In this particular case, when you're looking at these reading placements, that's where the bulk of the kids are, and that's about 10,800 students over these semesters that you're looking at have been judged as proficient in their reading level. The 158 reading is a transfer course, and that accounts for about 6,200 students. The one level below is 56, 2 levels below 54, 3 levels below will be 52. In terms of students, the 52 course is about 1,600 students. Your 54 course is about 3,500 students. And then your 56 course is 4,300 students. So what I did was to add together the 54, 56, and the 158, and I came up with about 52% of the students are in that range. But I'm really impressed with the number in the low 40% there who are coming to you already judged as proficient in their reading level. A place like Long Beach, you wouldn't see it that strong. And that turns into a real chronic challenge for the faculty and the students at a place like Long Beach, because reading is so central to the learning process. Now, when we get to the final placements, we arrive at the traditional Waterloo. If someone were to ask a research office, what's the course on your campus where students have the greatest difficulty, without refreshing their memory on the data, they probably would be very quick to say either elementary algebra or intermediate algebra. That seems to hold true throughout the state of California, and I suspect in many parts of our nation. So what you're looking at here in the math curriculum is that the 101 course is your transfer level, and you can see how few students place into college algebra transfer. The one level below is intermediate algebra, and it's been broken into two courses, Math 60 and 70 are the two halves of intermediate algebra. Then 2 levels below is elementary, and then you walk down to pre-algebra 3 levels below. In the very first row, Math 20 was characterized as basic math, which I suspect is arithmetic. When you take a look at the percentages of the basic arithmetic or the pre-algebra course and up to elementary, that's 85% of the placements are falling in that area. Is there any math instructor in the room? Okay, my heart goes out to you in the difficult challenge you have in higher education. In terms of numbers of students, that basic math class, according to Mark's numbers, is 5,500 students over these semesters you're looking at. The pre-algebra is 8,200 students. That's a lot of students. And you get equally large numbers as you move up to elementary algebra, 7,400 there. And by the time you're looking at the college algebra, it's less than 500 students. College algebra at the top level, it's less than 500 students. So there's the heavy lifting in the basic skills curriculum for your college in the discipline of mathematics. Here's what you're looking like in terms of head counts, and I think I may have shared this slide with you the last time we were together. When you turn that into annual FTEs, this is what it looks like. That last data point, the 14,766, is as of what we call period 2, April 2012. I couldn't find the final report posted to the Chancellor's Office website, so that number may not be entirely where you ended up with the 11-12 fiscal year. That final report would have come in the 1st of July.
Fred, let me say something. One of the things you have to realize is that typically if money wasn't tight and that kind of thing, you would be funded based on a different kind of a factor. You'd be funded based on your high school graduation rate, the adult population change, and that sort of thing. Your district would be very good in 2 to 5% sometimes in those areas. But because these all reflect where we begin to make those dramatic cuts and you begin to have limits on your income and that, you know, the number of students, these numbers have been depressed because of that. But up until that time, you should have had you should have been going uphill because you do have a good high school graduation rate. I was at Pasadena, and they give you a minimum at the state of 1%. Well, we always got the 1%, but we were only like 0.5% of growth because it's a built-out area. And so you weren't getting any increases and that sort of thing. Our students came from the Los Angeles district. 80% of our students at Pasadena came from outside the district. And so that's where, and so we were always tight because we were only getting 1% growth, but we had this huge impact. But those numbers are flat because you start at 2007-8 when we began to hit our crisis. You were going up until that point, and now you've been cut down. So that's not that you're not producing, it's just that you don't have any money to produce. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, all right.
Thank you, James.
Don't let it bite you too much.
Okay. Okay, we're going to switch and take a look at some of your curriculum characteristics now. This is just a snapshot of the fall 2011 semester, taking a look at what schools offered the most sections. And the big kahuna here you can see is Mark in the social science, humanities, business area, followed by the language and literature, and closely behind them math science and then health exercise. If you took the top 3 schools, that amounts to 63% of all sections scheduled. Now, this is at all locations, not just the Chula Vista campus. If you look now through the lens of attendance generated, weekly student contact hours, the number 1 is math, science, engineering, 23%, followed right behind the social sciences, humanities, business, and then language and literature. And those 3 combined represent 66% of all weekly student attendance hours generated, just fall 2011. Now if we switch and take a look at some trend lines about the nature of the curriculum you've been offering, you have shrunk your non-credit offerings, as many colleges have, in part due to the squeeze on funding. You have also shrunk a bit of the non-degree applicable but credit courses. That's the tan or the red colored bar. And the blue is your credit degree applicable. That's grown 4% over this period of time. In your transfer offerings, you've increased a bit in the courses that exclusively go to Cal State. And that's the top of the columns there in the yellow. In the basic skills area, you've increased the ones that are not basic skills, and you've decreased the basic skills a bit by just 2%. And I'm really not sure what's happening there. I would have thought you wouldn't have been contracting in basic skills. But this is just kind of a layman's external look at the curriculum. Yes, Randy?
Just for clarification, are you talking about the number of sections that were offered coded basic skills, or are you talking about the number of courses that were offered?
Number of sections.
Number of sections.
Yeah. And I'm using MIT referential files here, so there may be an issue with coding of the courses, like the question I was raising about the ESL hierarchy. But until I learn otherwise, that's what I'm going with. CTE courses. kind of steady as you go in the split between non-CTE versus CTE offerings. CTE, if you don't know, is Career Technical Education. I'm sorry. From the Chancellor's office, when the Vice Chancellor comes to town for one of these public conversations, she brings with her nowadays a listing of all the colleges in your region, for that matter, the entire state. And it reflects the percentage of student attendance generated by career and technical education curriculum over a decade. And in your case, this is what the Region 10 schools look like. Southwestern is kind of in the middle, 5th ranked among all the colleges. And you can see that Miramar does quite a bit of CTE education, as does Imperial, followed by San Diego City and Palomar. Your online offerings had been growing. These are just counts of sections that were offered as distance education. And I understand you're at a point of wanting to do a bit of a moratorium on this growth until you reassess the quality of services and the range of services that you're providing to the online student. So you may have capped at the 222 point, or you may slip back a bit on that, but that's a fair amount of growth, 62 more sections, 39% increase over the period of time I'm looking at. And I'm just looking at fall semesters here. And I'm going to switch now and just take 2 slides to look at your workforce, your employee group. And again, this is from information that's posted on the Chancellor's office. Every fall, there's a employee report that goes in toward the end of the fall semester. So I'm hoping to pick up the 2012 fall data and put it into your educational master plan, but it wasn't available to me for our presentation today. What struck me when I looked at this was the substantial decrease in classified administrators that you've had at the college over this period of time from 2007 to 2011. Then I also looked at employees by age and grouped together some of the age ranges and was struck by the fairly high percentage of educational administrators who are at retirement age. And some other schools we've worked at, the faculty group was quite high in terms of age, suggesting there's significant issues about replenishment of the workforce on the horizon for them, because there were so many involved. And on the balance of the slides, I just want to use to highlight and remind you of the strategic priorities that you set for yourselves when you worked last school year to develop your strategic plan. In part of that plan, you categorize these 2 major priorities as ways to fulfill your mission: student access and student success. And you have gone on to develop particular metrics and goals and action strategies to pursue these, and I encourage you to monitor what you do as an institution on an annual basis, memorialize your progress, and revisit your strategies over the next 5 to 6 years. It will pay you handsomely in dividends in terms of being a more effective organization, and will save you countless grief when the next accrediting team comes to visit you, if you can discipline yourselves to do that. It's the implementation that many colleges fall flat on after they've done wonderful planning, and I've seen it in any number of colleges where I've been on a visiting team. The other 2 major parts to your effort here are strengthening the institution, but you also said teaching and learning, economic workforce and community development. And then in strengthening the institution, you're looking at these 2, physical resources, organizational effectiveness, the human resources, and then institutional technology and research. And so far in our interviews, incidentally, we've heard quite a bit about institutional technology, growing pains, and wishes. that we'll take note of in the educational master plan, and that was likely going to be something that will carry over to the facilities plan as well. Linda Gilstrap provided me with a set of your board goals, and I just wanted to take the occasion in these slides to remind you of goals that the board set for itself for this academic year. There are 4 of them. These are the first 2. And then these are the last 2. And then your superintendent president has set out a set of 4 goals that you may have seen. And so I'm just reminding you of what her goals are as we sort of wrap up our presentation today and ask for any questions you might have. Okay.
Are you awake?
Yeah.
No, you just think about it. The one question, oh, go ahead, Randy.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay, good.
All right. You had mentioned when we were looking at population growth figures, especially in the city of Otay Mesa, there's a 259% projected growth out to 2030.
Right.
We've always had a discussion on campus of what are the centers going to become, how are they a part of our overall planning and helping students, and those big kind of big picture questions. Is it possible that this plan can also drill down to the demographic of that growth that we're expecting in Otay so that we can plan according to those demographics? Because if we're looking at Otay as the next retirement haven, and you've got 60 plus, the majority of people moving to Otay are in advanced years, is that really something that, could that help inform our decision making when it comes to what we're doing with Otay or San Ysidro or National City or any of our campuses?
To the extent that we can get that from the Sandbag organization, I would be glad to include it. To the extent we can get it from the Chula Vista's initiative on the Millennium Project, and I know in some of the material I've seen, they talk about the mix of residential, commercial, industrial in that particular project. And I'll have to look again to see if they're pitching it in any way to be a retirement community sort of place. I don't recall that. I can look at the community plan for Otay Mesa to see if in the residential component it offers any suggestion of a tilt one way or the other on population. I don't recall that. In and around your particular property, they're still talking, as I recall it, light industrial business. And a lot of what I've seen seems to be focused on core infrastructure improvements to facilitate logistics and transportation and trade, business trade as well as passenger trade across the border to Mexico. But we can go back to those resources and see if they're clues or anything.
Because that could definitely have an impact on the curriculum window.
Yeah.
With those particular demographics
Right.
and that information.
Yeah.
One of the more interesting examples to see for that, as far as reaching that population, is what is it? Was it Saddleback has the big program, I think, for that on the campus. That it's not just, bringing seniors in to take painting or something, and a lot of what we saw when we were working there, interestingly, they were taking a lot of math. They were taking a lot of the computing type classes. People are out of the loop, so to speak, and they're trying to get back into it. But it was interesting to see what programs you might check on that, because that was really an interesting, different approach.
I did have another question. In the interviews you've conducted so far, are you hearing a recurring call from the different schools for better alignment with K-12? And is it something that you're going to address in the master plan, would be how to conduct some of that alignment, that better alignment and communication?
I have not heard it so far in the school interviews that we've conducted. It's a college-wide issue. It's a piece of the implementation of the Student Success Task Force. and I know you've done some work on that. I don't know that I'm going to get into a lot of detail on that, Randy, as much as I will be discussing the importance of that alignment and tossing out some ideas for your consideration as a district. There's a kind of a tension in the educational master plan, how high up and abstract and institution-wide you stay versus drilling down. And the danger of the drilling down is you're mucking up into other processes that you have, like your program review processes, your unit planning processes. Yes?
Yes, I had a question about, you showed the statistic or the information related to how our basic skills course offerings has pretty much remained about the same. It hasn't really grown at all. And then you showed the graph where there were certain schools that were larger than others, and so it looked like math and English were not the larger schools. It looked like social sciences was larger. And I'm wondering what kind of recommendations you're going to make, or will you, in reference to serving our students in the basic skills arena.
I don't know yet, because the other piece of what I'll get at the next time we meet is in the umbrella of institutional effectiveness. How do students fare in their efforts to be effective student learners at your institution, with some consideration to the basic skills classes themselves, and then the flow or the migration through the basic skills program. And I understand that Linda and Dave are doing some research now on an experiment you've been running in pairing classes in math and I think reading and maybe composition, I'm not sure, that perhaps if they finish in time I can pull that in to the work as well. But you have to understand that the Ed Master Plan is not going to be so much a prescription, this is what you should do, as it is when we get to the opportunities for the future. Here's some things for you to think about that may help you address these issues either in your environment, internal scan, organizational performance. And here's some research that supports the idea that I'm suggesting you might want to consider. And then it's up to you to decide how much you want to take on. But the other key thing is Joyce's work on projections about growth that we then translate to space needs and compare to what you now have that suggests, is there a gap, what kind of a gap, and what are your needs likely going to be into the next 10, 15, 20 years.
And one other question
Okay.
I had was,
Yes.
looking at your geographic map of where we're pulling our students, it was interesting to see the colors below the United States border in Mexico. So I'm wondering, again, we're looking at avenues for increasing revenues, and I'm wondering what kind of, if you'll be looking at that, as that being a market where we may be able to generate more revenues to the college.
It may be, yeah. Donna, let me come back to you and just see if there are any questions over here. I haven't been looking this way and I didn't want to ignore you. No? Okay, Donna, you got it?
It would seem to me that one of the areas that I think would be really important in terms of research at this point to suggest to you is that we all know that not one or two departments can actually provide or mitigate that whole basic skills efficiency area. So I was thinking that perhaps we could look into how we could find research that supports the fact that we need to integrate basic skills across the curriculum so that we can all address that issue rather than relying on two schools or two different departments to provide that, because we'll never be successful with our students if we proceed in that area, in that manner.
Yeah, there is some stuff out there.
Yes, thank you.
I know you've looked at the Student Success Task Force recommendations, and I'm thinking about recommendation number 5 that talks about basic skills in the way basic skills are offered, looking at the sequencing and where are students being successful.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen our sequences of basic skills courses. Do you see that as a norm in other work that you've done? Are you going to have some recommendations in terms of looking at our sequences?
I will try to offer you some recommendations. I understand a little bit about what you've done, but I would like to learn a great deal more of what the Basic Skills Initiative has been doing on your campus, how it's played out. And then there are some things that are going on both in our state and nationally on the topic of basic skills that I would be glad to call to your attention and offer them as possible things you might want to consider, some of which you are perhaps already doing. But I need to do some learning quicker about what else you've been doing. Randy?
In regard to both ed planning and facilities planning, will you be looking at projections for student behavior in terms of library usage, considering that we're moving away from books and more into electronic books and electronic media? Will that be part of your projections in terms of both what kind of educational offerings we have, but then also what the library facility itself might look like?
Let me jump in there a little bit with that, Randy. One of the problems is that the way they give you library space for projections is just based on head count, again, that day enrollment kind of thing. Doesn't tell you anything about how you might use it. One of the things we found in the research that we do is that you do a great deal of tutorial learning, which comes under library categories in all the departments. You'll have a math lab where students come and they do that kind of study tutorial sort of thing. That's a category under which the state calls library space. So what's happened is it's getting dispersed out around on the campus rather than just in one domain where people come and they take, and they look for their books or whatever. And I think all the technology, we're beginning to see more and more of that dispersal rather than the centralization that we've seen in the past. Oh, okay.
I don't think I touched it yet.
Oh, sorry. Well, it sounded bad, but anyway. Oh, what's happened?
This is a tilted platform that just kind of collapsed on us.
Oh, okay. There. We get the, all right.
It didn't fall on everything.
Oh, no. And your
Anyway.
computer's still in one piece.
Yeah.
But I think we're still in a phase of we don't know where this is all going. Librarians still guard the space. The nursing requires that you have a certain amount of books in the shelves and that kind of thing. And how we use our libraries, I think, will change as all this technology changes and you can gain access. But we're still trapped in this old type of a system that says, here's how much space you get because it's based on students walking in there. But they walk into a lot of places. English has various labs.
Because it seems to me, and I'll do my own, back of the napkin educational master plan, but with the way technology can be used now, actual physical books on the shelves are less relevant than having access through a computer terminal or a computer point. Right. So having multiple library locations, even on the Chula Vista campus where students can access electronic materials, seems to be more in serving student needs than having a central location.
Okay.
So I'm thinking if we are looking 30 years down the road and we're seeing a huge increase in that kind of access as opposed to hard physical books where you have to be in a room with the book, something to think about.
Librarian has.
That came up one time when I was in Pasadena in the technology plan. It came up there rather than from the library perspective of having those kind of resources. Because what we began to find is that there were areas on the campus where students could go in, and you were sending them in from all the courses, not the typical ones. That anthropology or something also required students to put in so many hours or get some, do some research and that kind of thing that you would typically go to the library to do. It's just that it's the access to this information, not the location. And I think, isn't that what you're trying to say?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is one of the areas where I would be inclined to turn to the program review that the library staff authors. And I know already in looking at responses to the interview questions we put out that the library staff does have a perspective on it, and we're going to hear from Ron.
Oh, okay.
Never at a loss for words.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I do not want you burying the library just yet. And Mark Meadows and I had a discussion about this some time ago about where do you see the library going? the library is a growing organism that is integral to your student success. Don't think that we're just books. Our biggest part of the library is electronic. You have access to it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as do all of your students. So the library is much more than this building. We've gone further around it. We have about 35,000 electronic books. We purchase hundreds of databases. So to say that the library is going to be castigated as a small parochial type situation is far from the truth. We're there in every course. We dig with the basic skills. We know where the students are coming from. We address specific information to specific groups of students. We do hundreds of orientations for specific classes, ensuring that students know how to use it. For great members of the information competency community, we know that without information competency, students will fail. We've seen it. I was on the library and counseling issues committee and also the state curriculum committee with Joyce back in the early 1990s, where we were addressing these various issues. Students have to know how to think. They have to know how to take the information, find the question, research, put information in a usable format, and that is the key components of success, not only in education, but in any phase of life. So the library is far from being buried, but we are constantly improving. And with these budget cuts, we're being deeply gouged upon, but we're learning how to give more information, more access, and better ways of addressing the needs of the students. And I like Randy's idea that we can have little centers around, and I'm glad that the college is willing to give us the staff to do that. Oh, wait a minute, we're not getting the staff. Well, we're talking about all these kiosk type situations, and we explored those back in 1986. But the thing that I wanted to say about that is everybody's walking around with a laptop, an iPhone, some type of electronic piece of equipment. Those pieces of equipment access this library. And this library, if you want to read our program review, it'll be tenured to the program review committee in the first day of November. And it shows those great successes, those great strides forward. So I would love to talk to you about this personally, and I think I may be taking too much time. But I did have an opinion about that.
Randy, one of the things that Ben Seabury touched on when I spoke with him is the increasing importance of creating an institution that facilitates, accommodates employees and students who bring your own equipment and expect to be able to connect to the college backbone or to the college library on whatever kind of equipment they personally own and bring with them. And it's sort of on his to-do list of something that the technology plan would work toward. That might be a small step in the direction you're speaking about, access to information resources. But the other important point I think that Ron has raised is your hope that students will leave your institution competent and literate about ways to find information, to evaluate, to judge it, to use it properly is one of your core missions in a generally educated person. Other questions?
Well, let me just get back to Ron's situation. At Pasadena, when we did the technology plan, we identified what we referred to as pirate labs all over the campus. And what they had done, particularly in the sciences, had set up rooms of maybe 5 or 6 computers right by their science labs where they were researching the information from the library. That was exactly, and then again, what happened is exactly what Ron's talking about, is there began to be a need to have some resource person there to help them, not just have computers for them to get into that. So it is a serious, question, I think, of how do we use the libraries, in the future and that kind of thing. But it was, well, we call it that because we were now dealt with trying to deal with people, not with information.
Ron, then we'll get to Sylvia.
Okay. Should I let you go?
No.
Well, Fred hit on a good point. Students now are more technologically savvy than we were going into school. When I went to, back in undergraduate days, the computer was a room much larger than this, and we sat down and punched cards for hours at a time. You walk in now, the student is holding their iPhone, and you say, "Do you want me to show you how to find it?" No, show me on my iPhone. Well, I don't have an iPhone. We're still Luddite. But the thing is, the students are bringing their own technology with them. We have to make it so that they can access our information on their tools. And that is the thing that is growing faster than we can. It's just
One more thing that's my pet peeve is that what we need to teach them is how to assess the information they're seeing and evaluate it. Right now, there's a tendency, if it's on the computer, it must be correct, and it may not be. And that's what our job is to make them learn to think and ask questions.
And then we do a pre and a post test on our orientation, where we ask them basic questions. And you'd be surprised at some of the answers. Is Google a good source? Well, yes and no. Is it your primary source? Yeah. No, it's not. How about Wikipedia? They love it. Is it a good source? No, it's not. Surprise some of you, maybe, but Wikipedia is not a good authoritative source. So what we have to do is teach them in the high schools and the elementary schools. There are no libraries anymore. How are they supposed to learn it if somebody doesn't tell them? That's why we're on that front line trying to give them the information that they're going to need, not just to pass your class. It's wonderful if they pass your class. What we're trying to teach them is how to live their life in a life of inquiry. If you were a drummer in a rock band, how would you know what set of drums to buy? If you're a scholar, how do you know what sources are credible? And this is the thing that we're doing.
Sonia, you had a comment?
I guess an observation, a question about one of the slides on the PowerPoint presentation, where you have the demographics by school, where our numbers are coming from. I noticed you had allied health under National City and a percentage of all our courses. I suspect you included nursing in that.
It came from Joyce's data. I don't think so.
No. I think probably what you had was just
Can you
this
flip back?
campus.
Flip back.
Yeah, it was just this campus, because those others will all come in separately.
No, you had National City and you had Otay
Oh.
Mesa, but you had 0% at Otay Mesa, and you had a percentage at National City saying allied health or health occupations.
I have to find it again.
Okay, health occupations. There you
Oh.
go. So that's okay. So
Okay.
that's health
Where-
occupations. Head National City 2%. I suspect that might be Head Otay Mesa because we have nursing and health occupations.
No, National City has the dental health
The dental,
program.
yes.
Right.
And you have 0% of on.
That's
instruction
other.
in- But I don't think.
Where is it?
For Otay Mesa.
Nursing is much larger than
Yeah.
dental hygiene, I guess.
Well, what you see at the top of the pie chart, the OTH stands for other.
Other.
That's like miscellaneous. That's probably your small business curriculums that were just at Otay Mesa. But I have to look at the original sheet
No, I'd
that
have to look,
Joyce
yeah.
developed to go back. And we can send that to you or get back to you by email.
Yeah.
I didn't bring it with me today.
I
or I
guess
could look
my
it up.
point is, if 2% of all instructions coming from National City, as you have it there, I suspect there's a larger percentage coming from.
Oh, there would be,
Mesa.
because your health, your
Yes,
nursing
because
is
the
much
nursing,
larger.
yes.
Oh, no, yeah.
So maybe you could explain how that is derived. Like, for example, language, literature, math, science. Is that the percentage district-wide?
I think it is.
Okay, then, so if there's language and literature courses offered at Otay Mesa or at National City, they would not be included in their numbers, they would be included in the other numbers.
Right, and what you see in what Sylvia was pointing out to on the left, Higher Ed Center, National City, 2%, is stuff that's uniquely there and nowhere else.
And the percentage would be larger than what's at Otay Mesa and
I
nowhere
think
else.
this is
Is-
basically just this campus, and then you put in, because I haven't given you an aggregate data any
I
time.
don't think so.
It's only been this campus, and then the centers are separate on each of it. So I think that, because that should only represent this campus. And,
Or look at it
Okay.
Yeah.
in the background.
But just a quick question on the process portion of this, because, and I appreciate the gathering all of the data and how important that is and how important we get it balanced. But the conversation that I heard going on about the library, to me, seems to be an integral question, or an integral process of this, or an integral part of this process would be to a stronger understanding of everyone on the campus of what the other people do and how it works and how it feeds into the ultimate portion of preparing students to go out in the workplace.
Right.
So where does that portion of it come into? I looked at, because I had originally looked at scheduling for that November 1st, but when I looked at that particular meeting, that's very narrowly focused, it seems to me, when I read all the data about down to maritime and then health services. So where does it, because your points are very valid, as are yours, Randy, about the future of libraries. It's what we've been discussing in the city of San Diego now for some time. So where do we get down to the context of this?
What we've sometimes done before in the chapter on the internal scan is to turn to the program reviews that instructional programs produce and write a short couple sentences on kind of the core purpose or role of that particular program in the institution, and then try to pick up from their program review any vision they've articulated of where they think the program would like to go into the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking if we get enough of the comprehensive plans where that sort of thing is provided, we could draw on that to bring it into your educational master plan. But I don't know what your practice is on the campus with respect to sharing the actual program reviews. You have a web page where they're posted on the intranet, but I don't know how routinely that is accessed or made available to anyone to look at the college. Linda or
We
Kathy?
haven't made the program reviews accessible
Okay.
to the public. In fact, they were only made accessible on the
Right.
intranet for your use, as far as I know.
Could anyone on campus though see them on that intranet site?
I don't, Kathy,
Kathy?
isn't it password?
There is a password on them, and the reason behind it is that, let's just say in some cases there were some comments that were made that
Yeah.
were maybe appropriate for the public to see. I actually don't know where those might be, but that's what I'm understanding. But I believe that all the future, our plan is for all the future program reviews to make them entirely public, to put them on the website without passwords so people can actually access them, because it's very important to share that information.
Yeah. So in terms of a kind of a snippet of what the programs are about and whatever they care to share with respect to their vision of their future, we might be able to pull that into the Ed Master Plan. What I'm not sure about is whether all the programs will have a comprehensive report that we could look at and try to extract that from by the time we get to the end of the fall semester. You have a cycle that goes in multiple years before you're due for the next comprehensive report. But maybe this is a topic for the campus to begin to think about. How do you share with one another what your school, what your program is all about, and how it contributes? Now, I notice Rebecca hasn't raised her hand yet, but there's an opportunity in the learning outcomes work that Rebecca and her group are doing to maybe share that sort of aspiration and then data result across the campus, or at least within the school, of what you're trying to get accomplished in terms of actual student learning and how well you're getting there. But again, I don't know all of your practices by any means. Okay, someone else had a question? I thought, no. Okay. Thank you. I've taken some notes. I have a long to-do list.